Hey ratbags, it's Jade. Welcome to, finally, my review of Nightingale. You would have think I may have had this up a bit earlier, as I sunk 70 hours into a special preview version that we got given a good few weeks before its full release. But I did want to wait and make sure that I was given an absolute up-to-date assessment of Nightingale. Now actually, I try not to do too much heavy reviews on early access games. I prefer to give feedback on about what needs to be improved, but also some of the stuff I really liked. And you can call that a review as well. But I do think some early access games are very clear that they're going to be great, they just need a bit of work, and that's the thing to focus on. And then now and then there's some games that I probably will go out of my way to warn people not to touch with a barge pole. I'm so pleased to say, after covering the progress of Nightingale since its announcement a good few years ago now, that this game is amazing. And I'm going to talk you through why, and yes, some things that it does need to improve. Let's go. So the biggest and best part of this game is indeed the card system. For me, it offers extreme amounts of replayability and variation. Now, some people, especially survival fans, are pretty long in the tooth expecting to go and explore just one basic map, even if that map does become procedurally generated. But we've seen from other games like No Man's Sky and even Valheim, where you can mix up at least the different types of terrain and where you'll find stuff, that procedurally generated can work really well, especially for survival. But even Valheim is still a static map at the end of the day, with only No Man's Sky really being the one that you can maybe compare Nightingale with in its core concept. Yes, I know, one's a space game and one's a Victorian lamp punk, gas lamp, steampunk, funk punk, one of them games. But the principle is the same. You're exploring different planets, you're exploring different regions, you're exploring different biomes each time you go through a portal. So to me, that's extremely similar to going to a different planet in No Man's Sky. And I am here for it. I think this method delivers the most optimization in terms of getting new content out that can be different, that isn't tied to one particular type of lore, one particular type of setting. It means you can do almost anything with this as the future progresses. It's true at the moment that the biomes are fairly limited in terms of being swamp, forest, and of course desert. But these biomes, these playgrounds, are absolutely amazing to walk around. I think it's some of the prettiest art I have seen in the game. The skyscapes as well as the topography I think is just simply outstanding. Even in the dankest, darkest swamp that I'm showing off right now, there is beauty. The points of interest, the ruins that you come across. I have not seen so much detail put into something like this in a long time. This is all helped by maybe the technology of Unreal Engine 5, the lighting is stunning, but the actual pieces the game makers have made themselves are just great. From the very basic build sets you get are probably some of the best I've seen for the lowest tier. Normally stone and thatch looks kind of very basic and you can't wait to get upgraded to the next level, but I love the amount of detail that you're seeing on some of these build sets, and obviously the detail in the crafting station. There is just so much fidelity in everything that you place, every building part, every decoration or augment or crafting bench. It's just out of this world. It's definitely better than any other game I've played. Not to say it has to always be photorealistic. I'm not talking Sons of the Forest here with some of their biomes and stuff. You do still get that sense that this is a very artistic choice, and that is spread through the character customization. I know some people love it or hate it. It's definitely Marmite, much like me. But it is a choice. It's to differentiate it from so many other games out there, and I quite like it. It gives me the vibe of Dishonored, and I think that's pretty much what I've got to say. I'm not a big character curation, customization dude. Focus for me is on the main important bits that you'll be spending your time with, not what you're looking at for a bit of that time. So back to the worlds. Yes, important integral feature. Open up portals to other realms to get them resources. The free biomes are doing a solid job. They're amazing, and they definitely give me a lot of excitement about what is potentially going to come next. No doubt, I think in a while I probably will start to get a little bit maybe fed up of these types of biomes, because I don't always feel like there's enough changes in the algorithm. These are procedurally generated as well, they're not static, but sometimes it would be nice to really have some variation and differences in some of these biomes. But so far, after spinning up maybe 10, yeah, you do get some that have got maybe more mountains in the middle. Sometimes you've got more oases or maybe like waters and rivers in certain places, but they still give you very much the same vibe. It's not like that Minecraft level where you'd always find that amazing seed back in the day before you could have creative mode or spin around. You'd have to actually walk around the map for about half an hour to decide whether or not it had a good location. That said, there are still loads of stunning vistas, and I'm eager to go and build a base and try all the different build sets and see what they look like in each of the biomes. I think these mini realms do create something of a wall for a lot of players to get over, the fact they've got to traverse between them, but it just makes sense in the bulk of the game. It fits the setting, it fits the story. I much prefer this method than having just a static map that maybe won't ever have a chance to grow or change unless it's going to be paid DLC. With these realms you could do so much, not even relying on just the actual look of it or the topography or the resources. You can have, as I've suggested in other videos or talked about before, how about no gravity? How about one on the moon? How about completely underground? The story heavily hints that the next actual one that will be added will be a winter themed biome. I'm really hoping Inflection go a bit more crazy with what you can encounter on each one of these types of biomes. Maybe not with just simply the actual cards that can change and affect your statuses, the major cards, but actually topography, and really lean into some of the craziness that you could have by exploring multiple worlds and dimensions. Now of course, a lot of the mix matching and making these realms feel different as well relies on their major cards. Major cards will give you bonuses in the most, sometimes negatives to balance it out, and they change the landscape in terms of the colours of the skybox, the trees, and even the colour of the grass and floor. Not all of them, but most of them, so you're meant to be able to tell whenever you step onto a realm what card is kind of playing, or hope that's the idea. You find these cards out in the world, or you can go ahead and learn to craft them, and basically once you get the recipes you can mix and change up your home realm that you'll have as your base and the realms that you go and explore. So no playthrough is ever going to be the same as someone else's. You may rely on one type of card over another, you may be really adventurous and try every single one just to see what happens. As I said, most are geared towards bonuses in giving you better ore that you'll be able to collect and gather, or certainly get more resources once you start refining. And again, the framework here is outstanding. The idea that you can change and add so much, whether it's being able to jump 40 feet in the air, have tougher encounters with more harder enemies, or transform your idyllic realm home into something filled with smog because you've played an industry card and you're going to be getting double the amount of ore and ingots crafted and refined. It's such a cool feature. Imagine if some of your other favourite survival games, you could really change it and mix up what you're getting at any time with resources, the amount of items you're crafting, rather than just rely on simply getting upgrades. It really does present and change the look of it. Some of these changes you'll see baked into the game as you progress through the realms, the different difficulty tiers, and I'm not going to lie, it's a bit overwhelming at first, with unique names like Abeyance, Antiquarium, Gloom. There's like 9 or 10 of these styled realms, and then you get to the late game where everything gets doubled over again, and now it's Ascended Gloom and Ascended Antiquarian. You do need your brains and wits about you to really differentiate. I guess that's probably one of the first constructive criticisms I've got. The game just doesn't do a good enough job sometimes of directing you and explaining what you're doing. It's tried to put in a tutorial and it just about does the job in the first stages, but it kind of falls apart about halfway through, with much confusion about what realms you're meant to be unlocking on your Abeyance realm. In Nightingale you have a home realm respite, and this is going to be where you base your build, but you can build anywhere. But if you want to respawn in certain points, you'll always come back to this respite realm whenever you're finished exploring another realm. The tutorial at the moment though has you going to unlock the other realms, or the cards to make entry to the other realms, by going through certain dungeons on your Abeyance. And at some point it literally tells you that you've got to go and find a NPC in a realm that is like 2 levels above where you're at now. It doesn't explain fully enough that you've actually still got to go and complete some other dungeons. And I've seen a lot of confusion from players wondering why they can't get into a certain area. These are the kinds of things that will be absolutely ironed out in early access, and it hasn't stopped me playing the game completely. But I'm being fair and recognising for some players it really has stumped them because it's just not explained properly. There is a journal where you can check your progress at any time. There's a huge glossary that tells you where every ore, every item is and what level that you may need to be to go and find it. But crucially, in that same glossary, it doesn't tell you what weapon type you need in terms of the level. Some items that you'll find resources are gated You have to have a pick of level 230 to mine certain items, and it just doesn't tell you this in the glossary. It's these little nuances that really start to mount up. These little things that could have been added to it, that should be on it really in such a game with such scope and so many things that you'll be collecting and gathering, that mount up to people getting confused. The same goes for what you're crafting and doing. Whenever you're looking in a crafting bench, it doesn't necessarily tell you, hey, you can't craft this right now, but if you go and get this crafting station and this augment, you'll be able to. And that's pretty vital for a game with literally over 30 different crafting benches or upgrade stations that you may need to progress through, and so many more augmentations. The augmentations are basically decor pieces that will give either recipes that you can then go ahead and buy from traders to actually be able to craft, or be able to find as rewards completing encounters in the world. So you've got your recipe, you come back, you realise you need this augment, which might be a kettle, it might be a saddle horse, it might be a drinking horn. You place that down and then you're able to go ahead and craft that item. It's such a cool concept to actually make a base worth decorating and actually not just being an empty husk of a box filled with 20 chests. I absolutely love this feature and I'm so glad they added it, but again, it needs a bit of work. A lot of the info is tucked away either in the journal, so you have to go through that aspect rather than finding it in the crafting bench as you're looking and doing something, or it's tucked away in the traders section. You can find literally anything you want by checking through the list of traders and seeing what they sell. But as you can tell, you're looking at something very basic at the moment with just black writing, nothing to differentiate the kind of tiers, nothing to give you an expectation of what that might actually show. You've literally got to click on all of these to go and find a specific item that you want to try and get hold of. This is so tedious and it just breaks a lot of the time and immersion that you're trying to just craft something and you're not being told there and then directly. Instead, I've now got to scout through lists to find that augment that will give me the chance to craft that new armor I just got. I feel like the devs have probably struggled a bit with games that you grow and you get resources and they unlock new recipes, that thrill, that excitement of things like Valheim. Even Grounded does it. New bug parts will open up new avenues. And then realising their game is so dense, much more like an MMO in terms of crafting and the amount of materials you'll need, that you do need some sort of guide or balance to show you where stuff is. But this is the kind of thing that will absolutely be improved upon in time. I'd be astounded if they hadn't already received a ton of feedback like this or know themselves. It's just about getting the core game out and then refining and working on seeing what people really want added. But yeah, if they just had some of these options added where you could really see what an item, a weapon, a tool would need, then it'd definitely be a lot better. Of course, it explains the materials that you need for sure. Although that still needs work as well. You look in a chest and you might find 20 skins literally all looking the same, but there'll be different tiers rated 1, 2, Predator, Prey. This actually got simplified a bit because back in the early testing it was related to each individual creature, so you might have ended up with like, I don't know, 50 different types of bones. So I hope they continue to simplify it a little bit more and certainly brush up on the icons. And again, something I'm sure is coming. I have had a close hand with Nightingale. I've play tested it for nearly 2 years. I've seen the strides and the improvements they've made. It does scratch my head a little bit though that they have still got some of these issues with the icons and some of the explanations of crafting not really cemented for early access launch. I've read the reviews, I've seen the negativity surrounding the game, and I'm going to address it here quickly. I think, as I've said pretty vocally, and I'm pretty honest, I can't stand dumbasses that leave bombing reviews just because of features not in the game that you want. Nightingale has always been billed as an online game where you play with your friends, explore realms, have the chance to come across other realm walkers. It relies on that because you can play together. One of its best features is you don't have to waste money on servers anymore, well at the moment at least anyway, by going ahead and having a static realm. Obviously, yes, it's a different type of game. It's not Conan where you've just got that same map and maybe 20 of your friends or peoples in your community can join. This has what I think's the future for a lot of games because, believe it or not, I think servers are overrated. A lot of the time they remain empty unless you're a really hardcore group of players that play and consistently carry on playing together. Nowadays, most people will jump off a game and hop onto something else because there's so much choice. What am I talking about? If I leave my realm right now, Chicky, Commando, Nerdski, Hobgoblin, my ratbags that have been playing with me, they can carry on playing. They simply have that system that's like in Fallout 76 or like in Grounded, where you can share your world. Your world is a server already, and so players can boot it up anytime they want as long as they've made it their respite realm, their home too. You can even create cards to give to other players so they can access your realm if they don't want to make your realm their home either. It's such a cool system, it's such a cool way to play, not relying on someone to get on. Your server, your progress is not tied to one person, and that goes for all the other realms. You can go and do your own thing, you can reset realms, you can take the points of interest that have loot and essence, that's the lifeblood of the game that pretty much helps you upgrade and buy new recipes, and you can reset it so you get a whole fresh map, but it will still be the same type of desert, and you can just go and explore and find new enemies, new puzzles. Inflection haven't tried to pull the wool over anyone's eyes. They've been vocal about it in interviews, it says it a bunch of times on the Steam page, but nevertheless it was review bombed. Players literally just playing it and then realising it's not an online play game. I think that is pretty dumb for you to not realise what kind of game you're getting into when it's explicitly labelled. But hats off to Inflection, they've quickly responded and said that actually they'd always maybe planned to have single player, but it wasn't something they was going to focus on at launch. They decided to go with the hardest part of the game, the technology, in making sure these interconnected realms and online functions worked. Now you think to so many survival games that have come out in recent years that started off as just single player. Time and time again, it's the same thing you see in the comments. Why can't we play this together? Why can't I play multiplayer? No one's leaving a ton of bad reviews because a single player game hasn't got it yet, and then when they do add it, everyone's loving them. Planet Crafter just announced it's going to have co-op properly added to it. Smalllands has announced that it's got crossplay coming. These features are kind of all baked in seemingly, or it's all been done now, and now they're going to add an offline mode in the future. Maybe they could have been a bit clearer in some communications regarding whether or not offline would eventually come or not. But I went and checked back all the interviews that I'd seen and speaking some of the blogs they'd done, and it really hadn't been a case of them lying or trying to hide the fact that it was going to be an online focused game. I'm sure it's not just about being able to play while your friends are offline, there's other reasons why they wanted it or why this idea was going to be there. But yes, in effect, every realm you explore is a server, and you can set it to public if you want to meet other people in these realms, or you can have it completely private, hence why you can play completely solo. So fair play to them, a dev that can respond, a dev that can see what players or some players are really wanting from the game straight away and acknowledge they're going to add it. I think that's a great thing to add and definitely deserves a bit more respect. That's probably the only fly in the ointment for me. There's not been that many crashes, in fact I've had 3 in about 105 hours of game time including the preview. I've had one 5-minute spell very recently where I couldn't get in because of server issues. That's pretty damn good for a game that is an online only game and has had a launch with over, 50,000 players nearly playing it concurrently. There are stutters in performance. I'm running a 390 and a 109 KKK Intel processor, whatever the hell it is. And yes, sometimes it does shudder depending on certain situations where you've got maybe lots of bound or certain blueprints. Sometimes it can mean the FPS takes a bit of a drop in a tank. It looks like that's been addressed already. Seems to be an issue with the system default into ultra settings instead of actually diagnosing what you've actually got. And again, the speed at which the devs have realised this and put it out there as a known issue, I think is pretty good. But they were still pretty infrequent. The rest of the game run like butter. I'm nowhere near getting the kind of popping that you see on just a boring generic static map like Ark or Conan. Another benefit of having much smaller contained realms with lots of points of interest and things to do. So let's move on to that. What will you be doing in Nightingale? What is the core concept? Maybe I should have hit this a bit earlier, but you are obviously gathering resources and you're fighting against a plethora of different wildlife and creatures, using your tools with a heavy focus on tools as weapons to help other realm walkers build up their bases, maybe solve some puzzles or defend against some of the bound, the creatures that harass and harangue you all the way through. I think combat is pretty serviceable. I can't see why anyone's really got a huge problem with it. It does get a bit messy, it's a bit chaotic sometimes with so many creatures on board. It all relies on your strength. There is an attribute that basically you can increase, and if you've got high strength you'll be able to stagger a lot more enemies and they'll feel the effects more of your hits. Not knowing this though, you'll be wondering why some creatures do get knocked back and some don't. And you might put it down to maybe not a tight or not responsive combat system, but it's there, it's meant to be there as part of helping you get better with your strength skill so that you can really see the difference when fighting smaller, lower level creatures compared to higher ones than you. I quite like the combat, it's satisfying, it's meaty when you put a headshot in, the little ding that you get whenever you pull off a critical hit, and yeah, I just get that response that I'm really putting my pickaxe into the head of a spider like this. I've never played a survival game for its combat, even Conan Exiles, which supposedly has got some of the better combat because it had the first sort of dodge and roll mechanics out of a lot. Man, that game is janky as hell. You ever try fighting a mob or another player online and it is just an absolute mess of players just jumping and running around each other in circles. So no, don't buy this game if you're expecting Dying Light or maybe even Dead Island type first person action. This is a survival crafting game focus. Of course that does mean combat needs to be satisfying, but I don't think it's bad. I don't think it's the best, but it's certainly better than a lot of other survival games I've played. I think a lot of people feel disgruntled a bit with the shooting mechanics in the game, again because it feels quite light and you don't really get a big focus on guns. In fact, there's only about 9 guns throughout the whole game and about 6 of them you won't get until the end game. That's because guns are powerful, and the way that you augment your weapons with special abilities, with charms, infusions, enhancements, can really make you quite overpowered and overtuned. This will be something to carry on working on and hopefully add a bit more choice and variety in some of the gear, especially also armours, as you don't really get a huge amount of choice before you get to the kind of late game at the moment at least anyway, the watch, where you then got a series of vaults and activities you can do that are public. Now you can play these solo, there is a card to play if you really don't want to see other players, but it's quite fun. I jumped into my first one last night, well in the full version at least, with complete randoms and strangers. It was absolutely doable. It wasn't a frustrating experience trying to work out how to do something when you're not talking to others. And the shooting is adequate, it's good enough. I don't think it's terrible. I think sometimes maybe the hitboxes need a bit of work, and otherwise, like I said, as soon as you realise you can put augments on lots of weapons and improve your builds and craft and make the weapons better, that's when it becomes a game changer. You suddenly turn your 4 little bullet pistol shooter here to something pretty epic. I would love it if it had Witchfire style type of movement and gunplay. Go and check out that game to see what I'm talking about. But for me, the combat is pretty adequate. Like I said, it's not bad, it's not the best. It certainly doesn't deserve any extra singling out for being not as good as some other games. The effects on the weapons are amazing and I can't wait to see what else they add to it. Fire obviously being the number big one here. And it kind of all fits within the lore. Tools are really like a weapon here. Lots of them you'll be getting and they'll be doing the most damage because that's functional. You're a realm walker, you're not necessarily a full-blown soldier. You're ready and equipped to face dangers, yes, but a lot of your time is spent gathering, getting resources and exploring the realms. You'll unlock the ability to craft elemental damage types and you will get better gear, like I said, especially melee weapons. There's a huge amount of choice. Sadly though, so much of that is locked behind the watch, which at my runtime right now is about 40 hours into the game, so not that much. I took my time, I helped some of ratbags do some levels and I spent a bit of time moving bases and stuff. But effectively you only have about 4 different armour sets that you can really craft or try on before you get to this point, and then after this point there's like another 15 that you can go ahead and craft and grind for. It does feel like things have been weighted a bit too much towards the end game currently. Obviously this is early access, so this won't be the end game forever, or certainly they'll be adding more content that will make it a bit more padded out and maybe balanced a bit more in terms of the rewards that you get. You get plenty of cards, you get plenty of augmentations and buffs that you can apply, whether it's the realm cards, whether it's decorations, whether it's making sure that your bullets will always do more damage the next hit that you get. But it does feel a bit stingy in the actual armour sets that you can craft. You can make your armour pretty unique to you though. And again, I think this is part of that process of learning the quite convoluted crafting system and getting to grips with the fact that everything has different results. That if you craft a coat with a certain type of creature, that may be very different what you look like by the time you mix in what tier it is, or whether it's a fabled creature, whether it's got a name on it. What it boils down to the moment is prints, animal prints. Each creature in the game has got a unique pattern, and then this pattern will directly get applied to the armour that you're crafting. They're still kind of muted colours like beige and yellows at the moment, but the devs have said that dyeing and more customisation will be coming in the future. So there's absolutely ways at the moment that you can make your look a bit more unique and different, as you can see here. But this isn't demonstrated that well. It's just going to be a surprise when you craft something using fabled or higher creature level gear. There is a hell of a lot of stats and things thrown your way, and in that respect it is absolutely like an MMO where you'll be min-maxing to get the best builds and to craft the best gear. I think in recent times we've seen a trend towards survival being revitalised a little bit and also being made more accessible and just easy to get into. Power World's probably the best obvious example. There's no denying the Pokemon-esque allure of it, and also the fact that it is based heavily on Ark. It's a simple game, in fact too simple for me. I got bored after about 5 days. It's got a horrendous world to explore because it's just so goddamn boring and generic, and I definitely don't get that feeling with Nightingale. I feel like I'm always still discovering new points of interest, new places that I might like to build or try something out. But it does get a little bit overwhelming. There is just so much sheer choice in the amount of modifications that you can add that you will unlock as you progress, and not that many tutorials. You'll get like a few pop-ups here and there when you first go to put an infusion on a weapon or piece of armour. And I can't understand why they didn't make me want to do this. Don't want to bog people down in a 2-hour tutorial because that can absolutely kill, like other games I've definitely turned off of. It does need still a little bit of work on that and getting players to really buy into it, because that's the part that makes the game fun, is working out what kind of charms that you apply can have really good effects. Whether it's giving you just resistances against status debuffs, or whether or not it's giving you extra melee damage or extra range shot damage. And it just doesn't help that so many of the icons for some of this stuff look very similar or are really confusing. They just don't really show exactly what they are at first glance. There's lots of brightly coloured orbs that you collect, and these are the charms. You can obviously see there's different rarities like uncommon, rare and epic, but they've gone for strange symbols on them and not just really utilised something a bit more generic. Don't want to repeat myself, I've kind of already addressed this, but yeah, it is definitely an indicator that people are struggling because they just don't want to spend that much time reading and hovering over what an item is. So I do hope this gets remedied relatively soon. Slight grading and colour grading behind some of this stuff, even the different ores or different materials that you'll get to really signify it's a tier 1 or tier 2 would be probably the easiest and obvious solution. Things like sorting out inventory and being able to stack or deploy a lot of stuff really rapidly and quickly, that's all going to come. That's all quality of life, and I'm not really going to whinge or moan about some of that. I will say though, definitely, if you're not someone that wants to spend a lot of time sorting resources out at the moment, then you really might not like Nightingale. You are going to spend a lot of time, if you want to save yourself time later, making sure everything's organised. But that is also some of its best features in a way. Like I said, you're not making a generic box filled with just 20 boxes and a bed. You're making distinct areas where you're going to craft, where you're going to have your augments giving you these buffs, where you can create rooms and an estate that's actually pretty, that you actually want to spend time in and walk around. Shout out to Chicky Rocker, one of my ratbags that built this courtyard base for us, where I just built a traditional, more box-like structure, and it's great having these little corners dedicated to all the different crafting stations and areas once I've gone around placing more of the augments. I love this. I just really hope they make it a bit easier once you get into some of these menus. Nightingale has got a good amount of content, at least 100 hours if you're going to be doing a lot of the endgame activities and getting the best gear and items and spending your time building a base, and maybe more depending on what you really value and do in a game. There's like 7 different build sets, but again a lot of them are gated or weighted until the end part of the game. I think people really enjoy Nightingale if you really buy into the fact that you've got to utilise all these combinations of things, playing cards regularly to do what you want to do, making sure that you're getting more resources or you're going to have an easier time fighting certain enemies. Taking the time to do a bit of min-maxing and recrafting weapons and gear and seeing if you can make it better out of some of the resources that you found. It's busy work, but that's all survival games that have some sort of busy work. Things that I know will be improved in the future are things like the followers. I haven't got really a problem with them being a bit dumb. At the moment they're just walking backpacks. Although they can take a few hits for the team and they do pick and revive you up if you're Billy No Mates. But what other game can you literally fly across a canyon because you played the trickster card that allows you to jump up everywhere? Although this card also means that whenever you're gathering any wood, you'll instead get thatch. If you try harvesting a creature, you're going to get stone. These are the kind of funny things I want to see more added. I really want them to go out of their way to make more differences in terms of how you maneuver and certain things that you'll get, and resources as well. I think it's a fun side of the game that maybe is not being expanded upon enough in early access just yet. For sure, I would like to see a bit more variety in the different puzzle types that are in the game. At the moment, they rely a lot on shooting these plimps or finding runes. Some can be challenging. You'll find some where you have to shoot 7 in order, others will only be 3. If they iterate on this and add some different types of puzzles, then yeah, for sure, I think this is going to get even better. Your reward for doing a lot of these points of interest is the essence, which I haven't spoke about too much, but basically it's an upgrade system where you can apply to upgrade and basically make your weapons and gear better. And it's also, like I said, the stuff that you buy from traders. So it is the grind, it is the currency that you'll be looking for and is the most valuable. Taking a step into a mysterious mini portal that you'll find in a cave or a dungeon will take you to these bastilles, which are a little bit more complicated. And then this leads on to the end game eventually, which are called vaults. With the vaults just being much larger bastilles chained together, but with a boss at the end. And these can be randomized. Sometimes there'll be different types of bastilles, so you might have an intellect one where you've got to work out which plimps to shoot. Others might be about defending against bound and hopefully having a special drill do its job. So there's enough here. You'll find these, like I said, exploring, and then you'll also have it as part of the major endgame at the moment, where you just repeat them in public lobbies, or like I said, on your own, but they are weighted towards doing it with other players, so you will encounter a lot of enemies and tough creatures. There's plenty of alpha style creatures on the map as well. They're the named ones that you want to be making the best gear out of once you've got their hides and their meats and bones. And it all in all just becomes this satisfying loop of like, oh yeah, I want to get this essence. And now no, today I'm going to focus on getting my levers to craft my best armor. I think some early previews had compared it to something a bit like Destiny though, with these vaults and strikes. Yeah, maybe, but certainly in a survival format and certainly not as complex or long-winded. Hopefully this evolves as well and we get more variety added in terms of what you'll be doing before facing off against the bosses in the vaults. But they are pretty epic. I've shown the Elder Tree Otten, or will do in this video. I'm not going to spoil the others just yet. But they are fun, absolutely. And they've got some really unique abilities, some of the creatures and the enemies that you face. I think a lot of attention has been put into that. Nightingale is a deep crafting exploration game. You've got to take joy in finding some of these realms and discovering new points of interest and wanting to build new bases to see what they're like, but then having that come back to your home respite to spend a good amount of time crafting and utilizing and getting the most out of the stuff that you've been gathering. It's got a story. They are adding voice work to a lot of the NPCs, and I know I might have left this a bit late, but I ain't gonna lie, a lot of that stuff I just don't really hold truck with, not until full release at least anyway. I've learned my lessons from below zero in Subnautica that it's not really worth paying too much attention, as so much might end up being changed or rewritten. But the premise of you maybe fighting against the Fae, trying to get back to your fabled city of Nightingale by going through each realm to eventually succeeding, that draws me in for sure. That definitely is one of the things that first brought me to the game. The idea it was a Victorian sort of steampunk game was absolutely amazing. You meet various different characters from literature and real life, and they'll give you guidance about what you're meant to be doing or different ways to tackle problems. I needed to get a special resource from a Elder Eton, basically a tree-ent boss, and so I used a tracking spell to find it. This led me to where it was rooted. Instead of trying to set it on like a bunch of times like I had previously, where it'd come out the ground and start wailing on you, I gave it an offering that I'd worked quite hard for, following some of the missions from the NPCs, and it gave me what I needed and wanted instead. There's so many different ways to play. You don't always have to have brute force against some of these bosses if you want to take a more passive route, and that's such a cool feature. Anyway, I've gone on too long. I realised that I just ended up waffling a bit. But yes, Nightingale is ticking all my boxes. A really involved crafting system, a really gorgeous set of worlds to explore that you can customise to your liking, and a plethora of different enemy types. The sound design is amazing. I love the little ambience that you get around, even from crafting benches. It just sounds so gorgeous. There's a good amount of enemy variation, although you will be coming up across the bound a lot. I still think there's plenty of different creatures that you will encounter. And yeah, once they add in some quality of life features, like being able to move your items around quicker and being able to see at a much better glance what materials you need or what crafting benches you can find at certain places, I think this game is going to improve so much. It's got high replayability. You can make the game as easy or as hard as you want with all the different build sets as well. If a bit grindy, obviously, like all survival games to get hold of, I do think this has got such a bright future. And yeah, people don't seem to believe me, but I'm basically making this my main game. I haven't done that in a long time, maybe Valheim, maybe not here anyway. My second channel, I cover Grounded a lot and that's been my main game. But I've been floating around a long time now. I've covered a lot of games and had success with things like Sons of the Forest and others, but it's been a while. It's been probably since Conan Exiles days and before that Ark or DayZ that I really spent a good amount of time. I'm talking like more than a couple of weeks really dedicated to playing nothing but that one game. And I'm just feeling it with Nightingale, I really am. The only thing that's going to be taking me away is a Valheim update in the future. And I just can't wait to see what they add, and I'm really happy in what I'm playing right now. Let me know how your experience in the Realms has gone. What are you loving about the game? What do you want to see added or improved? And thanks for listening to me waffle on for the last half hour. Until next time, Ratbags, I will see you in the Realms.